My name is Clara Hayes, and I'm 31 years old now. But my story begins years ago, back when I thought my life was picture perfect, until I realized it was all a carefully constructed lie. I was adopted at birth, though no one bothered to tell me. On the outside, my childhood looked flawless. We lived in a sprawling colonial house in an affluent Connecticut suburb, where every lawn was manicured and every driveway displayed a luxury car. My adoptive father, Richard Hayes, was a highly respected corporate lawyer in Manhattan who left each morning in tailored suits with a sleek briefcase. My adoptive mother, Victoria Hayes, ran an exclusive interior design business from home, working only with wealthy clients who wanted their houses in glossy magazines. To everyone else, we looked like the ideal American family. But behind those pristine walls, I felt like an intruder in my own life. I had dark, curly brown hair and warm, olive-toned skin, features that stood in stark contrast to my parents' pale skin and straight blonde hair. Strangers often gave us puzzled looks, sometimes asking if I was an exchange student. My mother would laugh tightly, but her eyes never softened. The truth was, I had never really fit into their world. I was emotional, imaginative, and loved writing stories, traits my parents dismissed as useless distractions. Clara, why can't you be more like us? More focused, more practical, my mother would sigh. For them, love was tied to achievement. Bring home straight A's, and I'd get a nod. Dream out loud about being a writer, and I'd get a cold lecture about real careers. I threw myself into academics anyway, hoping performance could buy me the love I craved. Late nights with textbooks, countless clubs, perfect grades, it was never enough. The more I achieved, the higher their expectations climbed. It always felt like I was an investment they were waiting to see returns on, not their daughter. Hints about the truth surfaced here and there. At one Christmas gathering, my aunt accidentally whispered, "Blood or not, you're still family, Clara." She quickly changed the subject when I looked confused. Years later, while working on a school genetics project, I asked my parents about family illnesses. My father buried himself in his newspaper, and my mother snapped at me to just write that we're healthy. Their defensiveness planted a seed of doubt that grew with time. By my teenage years, suspicion consumed me. I began noticing small, strange reactions anytime I asked about family history. One afternoon, rummaging through the attic, I found an old photo album. The early pictures of me looked nothing like the rest. Strangers holding a newborn in a hospital room I didn't recognize. When I brought it downstairs, my mother snatched it from my hands. "You shouldn't be snooping, Clara. The attic is off limits." That moment cemented what I already knew deep down. There was a wall between us, one I would never break through. I confided in my best friend, Rachel Carter, the only person who truly understood me. "Maybe they're just private," she suggested as we sat in her messy bedroom. But I knew better. They weren't private. They were hiding something. The nights grew heavier. I would stare at the ceiling, wondering who I really was. Was there someone out there who looked like me? Someone who laughed the way I did, or who scribbled stories in notebooks the way I couldn't stop myself from doing? At school, I found refuge in the creative writing club. My English teacher praised me, telling me I had a gift for capturing emotion on the page. But when I told my parents I wanted to be a journalist or novelist, my father scoffed. Stories don't pay the bills, Clara. We've invested too much in your education for you to waste it on a hobby. By then, the emotional distance in our home had grown into a canyon. I was performing the role of the perfect daughter during the day, while secretly researching adoption laws and family history online at night. I had no idea that my search for answers would unravel something much darker than I ever imagined. One summer evening, when my parents left for a weekend gala in Manhattan, I finally acted. My father's home office had always drawn my suspicion, especially the locked bottom drawer of his oak file cabinet. I had spent weeks watching tutorials on how to pick a simple lock with a paper clip. Heart pounding, I broke in. Inside, neatly filed, like everything else in his life, was a folder labeled simply Adoption.
My hands trembled as I pulled it open. There it was, black and white proof. A certificate from an agency called New Horizons Private Adoptions. I had been adopted as a newborn. My birth mother? Amanda Lewis, a teenager from Albany. Reason listed? Unable to provide adequate care. I photographed every page with my phone, tears blurring my vision. But the shock didn't stop there. As I put the folder back, another caught my eye. Cypress Holdings. Inside were records of massive bank transfers to offshore accounts, emails with someone named Victor Dalton about clean transactions and minimal oversight. The garage door opened downstairs. They were home early. Heart racing, I shoved everything back, locked the drawer, and slipped upstairs before they saw me. That night, staring at the pictures on my phone, I knew my life would never be the same. I wasn't just the daughter they never loved unconditionally. I was evidence of a secret they had buried, one that went deeper than adoption. The morning after I discovered the adoption papers, everything in my house felt different. My parents weren't just parents anymore. They were gatekeepers of a secret that could unravel their carefully crafted lives. At breakfast, I watched Richard sip his coffee while scrolling through the financial section, and Victoria flipped through a design magazine, pretending to care about fabric swatches. For the first time, I didn't see them as intimidating figures. I saw them as liars, dangerous liars. Over the next few weeks, I became more observant. Richard stepped outside to take hushed calls in the driveway, and Victoria slammed her laptop shut whenever I walked into her office. Once, I overheard my father on the phone. "The Cayman account is clean. Use that for the Dalton transfer." I started keeping a journal. Dates, times, snippets of overheard conversations. I made copies of whatever I could get my hands on. I didn't know what I was building, but some instinct told me I might need it. Meanwhile, my relationship with them grew colder. When my calculus teacher called home about my slipping grades, Victoria cornered me. "You've been distracted, Clara. We give you everything, and this is how you repay us." Everything. That was always the word. "This is the kind of timepiece successful people wear," my father said. "Not a gift chosen for me, but a symbol of who they wanted me to become." When one of his colleagues asked about my college plans, Richard cut me off before I could speak. "Yale, of course. Law school after that. Just like her old man." I put my glass down. Actually, I'm still considering journalism programs. The table went silent. Richard laughed too loudly, trying to cover the moment. Kids change their minds all the time. But his jaw was tight. His knuckles white around his fork. The car ride home was worse. Victoria stared straight ahead, icy and rigid. Richard gripped the steering wheel so hard his hands shook. "You embarrassed us tonight," he said finally. "By telling the truth about my future?" I shot back. You're being deliberately contrary after everything we've sacrificed for you, Victoria snapped. I couldn't help it. I laughed bitterly. Sacrifices? You live in a mansion, drive luxury cars, vacation in Europe every summer. What exactly have you sacrificed? Richard's voice dropped low, almost a growl. You have no idea what we went through to get you. The phrasing hit me like a slap. Not raise me, not adopt me, but get me. I went quiet, the pieces falling into place. They hadn't just hidden my adoption, they'd bought me. The next morning, everything changed. The morning after my birthday, I came downstairs to find Richard and Victoria already waiting at the kitchen table. Not with coffee and toast like usual, but dressed as if heading to a business meeting. Formal, stiff, unreadable. Sit down, Clara, Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from them. His tone wasn't parental. It was cold, professional. I sat, still in pajamas, my stomach twisting. Victoria folded her hands neatly, her diamond rings catching the morning light. Your father and I have been discussing your recent behavior, she began. Her voice was sharp, detached. We've decided it's time for a change. I frowned. This is about college, isn't it? I just want to figure out what's right for me. This is about much more than college, Richard interrupted. That made them look up. For the first time all morning, Victoria's mask cracked, surprise flashing across her face. Don't be foolish, Clara. You have no job, no home. I have friends, I interrupted, real ones. I slung my backpack over my shoulder, picked up my duffel, and walked out the front door. Neither of them stopped me. Neither said goodbye. The spring air hit my face like freedom. Behind me was a house of secrets, control, and conditional love. Ahead was uncertainty, but also possibility. And in my bag, hidden among my clothes and notebooks, was the evidence that could one day destroy everything Richard and Victoria Hayes had built. They thought they were discarding a liability, but they had no idea what I knew, or what I was capable of. Rachel's parents welcomed me without hesitation. Their house wasn't big or fancy, but it was warm and alive in a way mine never had been. Her mom was an elementary school teacher. Her dad ran a local hardware store. They argued sometimes, sure, but there was love in that house. Messy, real, unconditional love. That first night in their guest room, I couldn't sleep. I sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open, scrolling through the photos of documents I had taken from Richard's office. Adoption papers, bank transfers, shady correspondence with names I didn't recognize. One name kept echoing in my mind: New Horizons Private Adoptions. Something about it didn't feel right. I searched online, but there was almost nothing. Just a dead website, last updated years ago. Strange for a supposedly prestigious agency. A week later, Rachel's father noticed me buried in my laptop again. What are you working on, Clara? Just trying to understand more about where I came from, I said vaguely. He nodded, thoughtful. Rachel mentioned you've been looking into some financial stuff, too. My brother Mike's a state financial investigator. If you ever need advice, he might be able to help. That casual offer opened a door I hadn't expected. The following weekend, Mike came over for dinner. After the meal, Rachel pulled me aside. Show him the papers. I hesitated, but something told me I could trust him. When I laid out the documents, his face... They had abandoned me because I no longer fit their image of success. But in doing so, they'd freed me to search for the truth. And the truth, I realized, could destroy them, and maybe expose an entire network of corruption along the way. By the time summer rolled around, I had built a mountain of evidence. I organized every document chronologically, highlighted suspicious transactions, and cross-referenced timelines with the information I'd uncovered about New Horizons. It was clear. Richard hadn't just laundered money for clients. He and Victoria had almost certainly participated in an adoption scheme that bordered on human trafficking. Rachel asked me one night as we sat in her backyard under the stars, "What are you going to do with all this, Clara?" I hesitated. Part of me wants to take it to the authorities right now, but another part, I want to find Amanda first, my birth mother. She deserves to know what happened. That decision gave me a new sense of purpose. While finishing high school from Rachel's house, I began reaching out through advocacy groups and nonprofits. One, called Truth in Adoption, connected adoptees with resources to track biological families. At the same time, Rachel's uncle Mike introduced me to a lawyer he trusted, Sarah Patel, who specialized in adoption law and financial crimes. After reviewing my files, Sarah leaned back in her chair and said, "You've done remarkable work, but if we go public too fast, people with power and money will bury this. We need to be strategic." Together, we built a plan. She would quietly feed information to regulators and watchdog organizations, triggering audits and investigations without tipping off Richard and Victoria that I was behind it. Meanwhile, I would pursue my passion openly by applying to a state university with a scholarship in investigative journalism. For the first time in my life, I was living authentically. Moving into my dorm that fall was liberating. My roommate, Kate, was a sharp pre-law student who became both a friend and a sounding board. When I told her a sanitized version of my story, she grinned. "Turn this into your senior journalism project. Expose the system from the inside." So that's what I did. I pitched a project on private adoption agencies and their exploitation of birth mothers. It gave me legitimate access to records and interviews I never could have obtained otherwise. Meanwhile, Sarah quietly set the legal machinery in motion. Based on the documents I'd collected, she filed an anonymous ethics complaint with the State Bar Association against Richard's law practice. She explained, "They'll think it's routine, but once they dig, they'll find things you couldn't." Then came the email I had been waiting for. Truth in Adoption had located a possible match. Amanda Lewis, now Amanda Garrett, living in Portland, Oregon. She had been searching for me for years because New Horizons had told her I died hours after birth. Attached was a photo. For the first time, I saw her face. My face. Same curls, same eyes, same way of holding her hands when she spoke. I stared at the screen, my throat tight. For so long, I had wondered if someone out there looked like me. Now I knew she did. The woman who had spent her life grieving a child she thought was gone was my mother. The first video call with Amanda shattered me. Seeing her face was like looking into a mirror of my future. Same unruly curls, same expressive hands when she spoke. "I never wanted to give you up," she said, tears streaking down her cheeks. "They told me you had a heart defect, that you died hours after birth. They even showed me a death certificate." I sat frozen, rage and grief tangled in my chest. New Horizons hadn't just stolen me. They had stolen decades from her. 3 months later, I flew to Portland. When Amanda wrapped her arms around me at the airport, something inside that had been broken my whole life began to heal. She introduced me to her husband, Mike, and my 2 half-siblings, Zach and Lily. We shared laughs, quirks, even mannerisms. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. Meanwhile, the walls were closing in on Richard and Victoria. The Bar Association's audit of Richard's law firm uncovered massive ethics violations. That triggered a criminal investigation into money laundering and tax evasion. His prestigious career crumbled overnight. Victoria's design business was exposed as a front for suspicious transactions, and she faced charges of her own. Their assets were frozen, the mansion was sold, friends vanished. They moved into a cramped condo, stripped of the power and prestige they worshipped. That's when they reached out to me. Emails, voicemails, even a letter, pleading to talk. They never mentioned the investigations directly, but I knew why they wanted me back. Control. Damage control. I agreed to meet them once. Not for reconciliation, for closure. We sat across from each other in a modest cafe near the courthouse where Richard had appeared days earlier. They looked smaller now, their designer confidence gone. Did you know New Horizons was operating illegally when you adopted me? I asked. Richard sighed heavily. We suspected, but we didn't ask too many questions. We'd waited years for a child. When Patricia Goldstein promised she could place one quickly, we chose not to look deeper. I stared at him. Did you know my birth mother was told I had died? Their shock seemed genuine. No, Victoria whispered. We were told she gave you up willingly. She's alive, I said firmly. Her name is Amanda. She's a nurse, she has 2 other children, and she spent 17 years mourning me. Neither spoke. Richard dropped his gaze. Victoria's eyes glistened, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or fear. You didn't just lie to me. You erased who I was. You never saw me as your daughter. I was an investment, a trophy, something you could mold to fit your perfect image. We did love you, Victoria said softly. In your way, but it was never enough. I stood, pushing back my chair. I don't need revenge. Life already caught up with you. What I need is peace. And I've finally found it, with people who actually love me. Their faces blurred behind me as I walked into the sunlight. For the first time, I felt weightless. In the months that followed, the investigations against them deepened. Richard was disbarred and sentenced to prison. Victoria avoided jail, but faced probation and community service. Their empire, their reputation, their carefully constructed illusion, gone. But my story didn't end with their fall. I flourished at university, publishing a groundbreaking series on adoption fraud that won national recognition. With Amanda's support, I founded an advocacy group called Voices for Ethical Adoption, connecting adoptees and birth parents, pushing for reform. I built a chosen family. Rachel, Kate, Amanda, my siblings, people who saw me, not as an investment, but as myself. Looking back, I realized something profound. Being cast out at 17 had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It freed me from a gilded cage, forced me to seek the truth, and led me to real love and belonging. And as I stood at a podium years later, accepting an award for investigative reporting, I thought of that morning in the Hayes kitchen when they told me to leave. They thought they were discarding me, but in reality, they had set me free.